The warning came on a Tuesday morning, broadcast across every frequency humanity had ever used. Commander Hyunwoo was drinking his third cup of coffee on the orbital defense platform when the transmission cut through the usual chatter. The voice was mechanical, translated by algorithms into flat, emotionless Korean, English, Mandarin, and 200 other languages simultaneously. This is the Valthak Empire. You will surrender within 72 hours. Resistance is futile. Compliance will result in minimal casualties. Refusal will result in complete extinction. Hyunwoo dropped his coffee. The cup spun in the low gravity, brown liquid forming perfect spheres that drifted toward the viewing port. Beyond the transparent aluminum, Earth hung like a blue marble against the black, home to 11 billion people who had just been given 3 days to live. The transmission included footage. Not threats or promises, just documentation, world after world, each one conquered by the Valthak Empire. The images were clinical, almost boring in their repetition. Massive warships appearing in orbit, defense fleets engaging and being destroyed within hours, cities burning, population surrendering, 73 civilizations, 73 victories, all following the same pattern. "Sir?" Lieutenant Jiwan's voice cracked over the internal comm. She was 24 years old, fresh from the academy, and she sounded terrified. "What do we do?" Hyunwoo pulled himself away from the viewing port and grabbed a handhold. "What did they do?" Earth's defense fleet consisted of 47 warships, most of them built in the last decade when humanity had finally achieved reliable fusion drives. They had railguns, missiles with nuclear warheads, and exactly zero experience fighting anyone except themselves. "We follow protocol," he said, trying to sound calm. "Alert Earth Command. Full defensive positions, and pray someone down there has a plan." On Earth, Dr. Yunbi was already working. The First Contact Institute in Busan had been established 15 years ago, when humanity discovered faster-than-light communication. They'd been sending messages into the void ever since, hoping for a response. They'd gotten one, just not the one anyone wanted. Yunbi sat surrounded by holographic displays, each one showing fragments of the Valthak transmission. She was a xenolinguistics expert, which meant she studied alien languages that might exist. Now she was studying one that definitely did, and she didn't like what she was finding. "They're not threatening us," she said to her assistant. "They're informing us. What's the difference? A threat implies you have a choice. This is just a schedule notification. They've already decided we're conquered. They're just telling us when it happens." The assistant, a young man named Taeyang, looked pale. "Can we negotiate?" "With what?" "We have nothing they want except our planet, and they've taken 73 of those already." Yunbi pulled up another file, this one showing the Valthak language structure. It was efficient, logical, completely lacking in words for concepts like mercy or diplomacy. They had 17 different words for surrender, though. Across the planet, governments convened emergency sessions. The United Earth Council, formed only 6 years ago after the last major war ended, found itself facing an enemy that made human conflicts look like playground fights. President Garcia spoke from Geneva, his face projected on screens worldwide. "We are facing an existential threat," he said, "but humanity has faced extinction before. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that should have ended us. We will survive this too." The words sounded brave. Nobody really believed them. Admiral Minho sat in the command center of the UEDF flagship Indomitable, watching sensor data stream in from the outer system. The Valthak fleet had been detected beyond Neptune's orbit, moving steadily inward. They weren't hurrying. They didn't need to. "How many ships?" he asked. 347 capital ships, sir, plus an unknown number of support vessels. Mass estimates suggest each capital ship is at least 10 times larger than our biggest warship." Minho was 63 years old. He'd fought in the Pacific conflict, back when humanity's biggest worry was which country controlled which island. He'd seen combat, knew what modern warfare looked like. This wasn't warfare. This was extermination. "We need intelligence," he said. "I need to know how they fight, what their weaknesses are, if they have any." "Sir, we'd need to get a ship close enough to scan them properly." "That's a suicide mission." "Then find me someone willing to die for 11 billion people." Commander Hyunwoo volunteered within the hour. He took a small, fast reconnaissance ship, the kind designed for quick surveys of asteroids and comets. It had minimal weapons and almost no armor, but it was fast and its sensor suite was the best humanity had. "You don't have to do this," Admiral Minho told him over the comm before he launched. "Yes, I do." Hyun-woo replied. I have a daughter in Seoul. She's 7 years old. If I'm going to die, I'd rather it mean something. The trip to the outer system took 18 hours. Hyun-woo spent most of it reviewing everything humanity knew about the Valthak, which wasn't much. They'd appeared in galactic communication networks about 1,000 years ago. Since then, they'd expanded steadily, conquering every species they encountered. No one had ever beaten them. No one had even slowed them down. When he got close enough to scan the fleet, Hyun-woo understood why. The ships were massive, yes, but more than that, they were organized. They moved in perfect formation, each vessel exactly where it needed to be. Their weapon systems were sophisticated beyond anything humanity had developed. Their shields could probably withstand a nuclear blast without flickering. But as he watched them, Hyun-woo noticed something else. They were confident, almost lazy. The fleet moved like a parade, not like an invasion force expecting resistance. They'd done this 73 times before. They thought they knew exactly how this would end. He recorded everything, transmitted it back to Earth, and somehow made it back alive. The Valthak didn't even bother chasing him. They didn't consider a single human scout ship worth the ammunition. When Hyun-woo docked at the orbital platform, he found a message waiting. Dr. Eunbi wanted to meet with him immediately. Something about Protocol Omega, whatever that was. He looked out at Earth one more time before heading to the shuttle. 60 hours left on the ultimatum. 60 hours to find a way to save 11 billion people from an enemy that had never lost. The coffee stains were still floating near the viewing port, frozen droplets catching the light from the sun. Hyun-woo watched them for a moment. These tiny spheres hanging in space going nowhere. That's what humanity was right now. Hanging in the void, waiting to fall. He turned away and headed for the shuttle. Whatever Protocol Omega was, it was their only chance. The meeting room was buried 300 meters below the surface in Geneva, protected by concrete and steel that wouldn't matter at all if the Valthak decided to fire. Commander Hyun-woo sat at a table with 6 other people, all of them looking tired and scared. Dr. Eunbi was there, along with an older man she introduced as Professor Daehan, a military historian. There was also a woman in a dark uniform who introduced herself as Captain Soman, head of psychological operations, and a council member named Junho who looked like he hadn't slept in days. Thank you for coming, Junho said. We don't have much time, so I'll be direct. The council has activated Protocol Omega. I don't know what that is, Hyun-woo said. Most people don't. It's been classified since the protocol was created 40 years ago, right after the Pacific conflict ended. When we established the United Earth Council, certain members realized something. If humanity ever faced an external threat, we'd need access to everything. All our knowledge, all our history, even the parts we'd rather forget. Dr. Eunbi pulled up a holographic display. It showed a database, massive, beyond comprehension. This is the complete archive of human civilization. Every book, every document, every video recording we've managed to preserve, including detailed records of every war we've ever fought. I don't understand, Hyun-woo said. How does our history help us fight the Valthak? Professor Daehan leaned forward. He had the look of someone who spent too much time reading about terrible things. Commander, you provided excellent intelligence about the Valthak fleet. You noted they seemed confident, almost casual in their approach. Do you know why? Because they've done this 73 times before. Exactly. They have a proven method, overwhelming force, technological superiority, and the assumption that their enemy will make rational choices. Every civilization they've conquered has looked at the odds, realized they couldn't win, and surrendered to minimize casualties. Captain Soman spoke up. We've been analyzing every piece of information we have about the Valthak. Their communications, their tactics, their psychology. They're logical, efficient, and completely unprepared for an enemy that doesn't care about casualty ratios. Hyun-woo felt something cold settle in his stomach. What are you suggesting? We're suggesting, Junho said quietly, that we show them what humanity really is. Not what we've become in the last few decades of peace, but what we've been for our entire history. Dr. Eunbi began pulling up files. The first one showed trenches from World War I, men living in mud and filth, dying by the millions for a few meters of ground. The next showed atomic bombs falling on cities, then biological weapons, chemical attacks, scorched earth. Campaigns where armies burned everything behind them so their enemies would starve. The Valthak think they know warfare, Professor Daehan said. They think it's about technology and logistics. They've never met a species that invented the concept of total war. They've never faced an enemy that would rather destroy itself than lose. Hyunwoo stared at the images. You want to threaten them with this? They have 300 ships. We have 47. We don't need to beat them, Captain Soman said. We need to make them afraid of what it would cost to beat us. The Valthak Empire controls 73 worlds. That's a lot of territory to manage. A lot of populations to control. What happens if they take heavy losses conquering Earth? What happens if their other subjects see them bleed? They'll realize we're not like the others, Dr. Yunbi added. Every species they've conquered was peaceful, or at least fighting among themselves hadn't been their primary activity for generations. Humanity. We've been at war with ourselves for our entire recorded history. We know things about warfare that most species never even conceived of. Professor Dahan pulled up more files. The Mongol conquests where entire cities were erased from history. The 30 Years' War, where a third of Germany's population died. The World Wars, where humanity developed industrial-scale methods of killing. The Cold War, where two superpowers built enough nuclear weapons to destroy the planet 50 times over, then somehow managed not to use them. This is our advantage, Dahan said. Not our technology, not our numbers. Our history. Our capacity for violence, and more importantly, our capacity to restrain that violence when it suits us. We're a species that can calculate acceptable losses in the millions and still call it a victory. Junho looked directly at Hyunwoo. We're going to send the Valthak a message. Not a plea for mercy, not a threat of resistance. A promise. We're going to show them exactly what kind of species they've decided to fight. Will it work? Hyunwoo asked. I don't know, Junho admitted. But it's the only weapon we have that they might not have seen before. Fear. They worked through the night, and the next day and into the second night. Dr. Yunbi coordinated the linguistic aspects, making sure everything would translate perfectly into the Valthak language. Professor Dahan selected the historical examples, choosing ones that would demonstrate humanity's unique approach to warfare. Captain Soman designed the psychological framework, determining the order and presentation that would have maximum impact. Hyunwoo found himself contributing more than he expected. He'd studied military history as part of his training, and he understood tactics in a way the academics didn't. You need to show them the math, he said at one point. The Valthak are logical. Show them the casualty ratios from battles where the defending force was outnumbered. Show them how many times in human history the smaller force won by being willing to take losses that the bigger force couldn't accept. They included examples of asymmetric warfare, guerrilla campaigns that lasted decades, insurgencies that eventually exhausted occupying forces, economic warfare that destroyed empires without firing a shot, and, most importantly, they included humanity's doctrine of mutually assured destruction. The idea that even in defeat, you could still destroy your enemy. The key, Captain Somin explained, is to make them understand that conquering Earth isn't a simple military operation. It's an investment that might bankrupt the entire empire. Even if they win, they'll be weakened. And they have 73 other worlds that might see that weakness as an opportunity. Dr. Yunbi finished the translation work 36 hours after they started. The message was ready. It was concise, brutal, and honest. It didn't exaggerate human capabilities or make empty threats. It simply presented the facts of human history and let the Valthak draw their own conclusions. Who delivers it? Professor Dahan asked. Everyone looked at Hyunwoo. You're already a hero for the reconnaissance mission, Junho said. And you have a daughter in Seoul. When you speak, it should be personal. Let them hear what a father sounds like when he's promising to destroy you. Hyunwoo thought about his daughter, Nari, 7 years old and probably confused about why school was canceled and everyone looked scared. He thought about teaching her to ride a bicycle last summer, about her laugh when he pushed her on the swings. He thought about what he would do to anyone who tried to hurt her. I'll do it, he said, but I'm not reading a script. I'll deliver your message, but the final words are mine. They agreed. Lieutenant Jiwon from his platform was assigned to handle the technical aspects of the broadcast. She was nervous but determined, her hands steady as she set up the equipment. This goes out on every frequency we have, she explained. The Valthak will receive it. So will every other species in range. This isn't just a message to our enemy. It's a message to the galaxy. Hyunwoo nodded. That made sense. If they were going to reveal what humanity was capable of, they might as well make sure everyone knew. Maybe it would buy them allies. Maybe it would isolate them further. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn something about the species from Earth. The message was ready. 24 hours remained on the ultimatum. Hyunwoo stood in front of the camera, Earth hanging in the viewing port behind him, and prepared to show the galaxy what humanity had been hiding. Lieutenant Jiwon's hands were shaking as she made the final adjustments to the broadcast equipment. She'd triple-checked everything, but she kept checking again because if something went wrong, if the transmission failed or got corrupted, Earth might lose its only chance. 24 hours left on the Valthak ultimatum, and they were betting everything on a message. "We're ready," she said quietly. "All frequencies open. The moment you start speaking, every ship, every station, every civilization within 1,000 light-years will receive this." Commander Hyunwoo stood in front of the camera. He wore his uniform, but he'd removed the jacket. Just a simple white shirt now, the kind any father might wear. Behind him, through the viewing port, Earth rotated slowly. Blue oceans, white clouds, the lights of cities on the dark side. 11 billion people down there, most of them asleep, unaware that their fate was being decided by a message broadcast into space. "Whenever you're ready," Jiwon said. Hyunwoo took a breath. He thought about the database they'd compiled. Thousands of years of human warfare distilled into a presentation that would last less than an hour. But first he needed to establish who was speaking. "My name is Commander Hyunwoo of the United Earth Defense Fleet. I'm speaking to the Valthak Empire, and to anyone else listening. You've given us 72 hours to surrender. We're not going to do that, but before you proceed with your attack, we think you should know something about us, about what we are, about what you're actually choosing to fight." Jiwon initiated the first sequence. The holographic display behind Hyunwoo filled with images from human history, old photographs, grainy video, artistic renderings of battles from before cameras existed. The presentation was chronological, starting with ancient warfare and moving forward through time. "This is the Battle of Thermopylae," Hyunwoo narrated as the images changed. 300 soldiers held a pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They all died. They knew they would die. They did it anyway because it bought their people time. This happened 2,500 years ago. We still tell stories about it, more images. Roman legions, medieval sieges, cavalry charges that were essentially suicide attacks. We've been fighting each other for our entire history. Not occasionally, not as a last resort. Constantly. We've developed entire philosophies around warfare. We've made it an art form. The images shifted to more recent history. Trenches from World War I. Men charging into machine gun fire, dying by the thousands for tiny gains. This is the Somme. 57,000 casualties on the first day. The battle lasted 4 months. We kept fighting. We've always kept fighting. Jiwon felt sick watching the images cycle past. She'd studied history in school, but seeing it presented like this, as evidence of humanity's nature rather than tragedies to be mourned, made it different. Worse somehow. Hyunwoo continued. "You've conquered 73 civilizations. You probably think you understand warfare. You think it's about technology, about force projection, about logistics. You're wrong. Warfare is about will. It's about who wants to win more. It's about who's willing to pay the higher price." The presentation moved to World War II. Atomic bombs. "We developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We used them, not as a last resort, not after years of consideration. We used them to end a war faster. And then we developed even more powerful weapons. Images of nuclear tests, mushroom clouds, charts showing the arsenals of the Cold War superpowers. At one point, we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy every major city on our planet multiple times over. 2 human nations pointing these weapons at each other, ready to end our entire species rather than lose a political conflict. We built these weapons and then somehow we had the discipline not to use them. Can you understand that? The restraint it takes to have the power to destroy everything and choose not to?" Captain Soman had explained this was the key point, showing the Valthak not just humanity's capacity for violence, but the cold calculation behind it. The ability to develop ultimate weapons and then engage in brinksmanship, dancing on the edge of extinction for decades. "We call it mutually assured destruction," Hyunwoo said. "The doctrine that even if you destroy us, we'll destroy you. Neither side wins. Both sides lose. And we were willing to accept that. Are you?" More images now of guerrilla warfare, insurgencies, asymmetric conflicts. You're probably thinking that your technology is superior. You're right. You could probably destroy our defense fleet in hours. You could bomb our cities from orbit. You could kill millions of us. But can you kill all of us? Because that's what you'll need to do. The presentation showed charts and graphs now. Mathematical analysis of insurgency warfare. On average, an occupying force needs about 20 soldiers for every 1,000 civilians to maintain control of a hostile population. You're going to occupy a planet with 11 billion people. That's 220 million occupation troops. For one planet, you control 73 worlds. Can you afford that? Hyunwoo leaned forward slightly. And that's assuming you can conquer us quickly. What if you can't? What if we fight for every city, every building, every room? What if we make you pay for every meter of ground? Our own history shows that determined defenders can hold out for years. Stalingrad. The siege lasted 5 months. 800,000 total casualties. One city. Ji-won watched the broadcast data. The message was being received. Ships were responding, some of them Valthak, some from other species. Everyone was listening. We've studied your previous conquest, Hyunwoo continued. They were quick, efficient. The civilizations you fought made rational decisions. They looked at the odds, calculated the casualties, and surrendered to save lives. We're not going to do that. Do you know why? He paused, let the question hang in space. Because we don't think like that. When we go to war, we don't calculate acceptable casualties. We accept whatever casualties it takes to win. And we're very good at winning wars we should lose. The smaller force has won in human conflicts more times than you'd think possible. Because we're willing to use tactics you wouldn't consider. We're willing to sacrifice ourselves in ways you can't imagine. More images, these ones of scorched earth campaigns, cities burned by their own defenders to deny them to invaders. We've destroyed our own resources rather than let an enemy use them. We've poisoned our own land. We've made territories uninhabitable rather than allow occupation. The presentation shifted to show economic warfare, supply chain disruptions, sabotage campaigns. You have an empire. That requires logistics, trade, communication. We're very good at destroying those things. We've spent thousands of years learning how to cripple systems from inside. And you're going to bring us into your empire? We'll be the virus that destroys you from within. Admiral Minho was watching the broadcast from the Indomitable. He'd approved the message, but seeing it now, hearing Hyunwoo deliver it with such cold precision, even he felt a chill. This was humanity with all its masks removed, showing the galaxy what they really were underneath the peaceful facade of the last few decades. Here's what's going to happen if you attack, Hyunwoo said. You'll win the space battle. Your technology is better. Your numbers overwhelming. You'll establish orbital superiority. Then you'll start landing troops, and that's when your problems begin. Every landing will be contested. Every position will be a fight. We have 7 continents, hundreds of nations, thousands of cities. How long can your empire sustain a grinding occupation of a planet that refuses to give up? The images behind him showed resistance movements throughout history, showing how small groups could tie down large armies for years or decades. And while you're focused on conquering Earth, what happens to the rest of your empire? You've conquered 73 worlds. How many of them are truly loyal? How many are waiting for you to show weakness? Because we're going to make you show weakness. Even if we lose, even if you kill every human alive, the cost will be so high that your empire will fracture. Your other subjects will see that you can bleed, and they'll start wondering if they should try. Hyunwoo straightened. You sent us footage of your victories. Clean, efficient, overwhelming. Now we've sent you footage of our wars. Brutal, costly, desperate. This is who we are. This is what you're choosing to fight. We're not the 74th civilization on your list. We're the one that ends your perfect record. He paused one final time, and when he spoke again, his voice was soft but somehow more frightening than when he'd been describing atrocities. You have 24 hours left on your ultimatum. We suggest you spend that time calculating the real cost of conquering Earth. Not just the ships you'll lose in the initial battle, but the decades of occupation, the resources spent, the attention diverted from your other holdings. Ask yourself if one planet is worth destabilizing an empire. The transmission ended. Ji-won closed the broadcast channels, her hand still shaking. They'd done it. They'd sent the message. Now they waited to see if the galaxy would shudder. The Valthak fleet stopped moving forward 6 hours after the broadcast ended. Fleet Master Korin stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing unease. 347 capital ships, the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy, hanging in space beyond Saturn's orbit, not advancing, not retreating, just waiting. Status of the invasion schedule? He asked his tactical officer. Delayed indefinitely, Fleet Master. Command Council is reviewing new intelligence. New intelligence. That was one way to describe what humanity had sent them. Corrine had watched the entire broadcast 3 times now. Each viewing made him more uncomfortable. He'd conquered 12 worlds personally during his career. This should have been number 13, an easy victory to add to his record before retirement. Instead, he was watching historical records of a species that had somehow managed to survive itself. Play the section about the atomic weapons again, he ordered. The footage appeared on his display. Cities vanishing in flames. Then the charts showing the nuclear arsenals during something humans called the Cold War. Thousands of weapons, each one capable of destroying a city. 2 human factions pointing them at each other for decades. Analysis, Corin said. His tactical officer, a younger male named Rovik, pulled up the data they'd compiled. The humans weren't exaggerating. We've confirmed the basic facts through independent sources. They did develop these weapons. They did build enough to destroy their own biosphere, and they maintained this standoff for 43 of their years without actually using them. That makes no sense, Corin said. If they had the ability to destroy their enemies, why didn't they? Because their enemies had the same ability. Using the weapons would have guaranteed mutual destruction. Corin considered this. The Valthak Empire had conquered 73 worlds over the past millennium. Some had fought. Most had surrendered quickly once the odds became clear. None of them had ever developed weapons designed to destroy themselves. None of them had ever demonstrated the kind of sustained, multi-generational warfare that humanity seemed to consider normal. What's the casualty projection for conquering Earth? He asked. Rovik hesitated. That depends on multiple factors. If they surrender after we establish orbital superiority, minimal. If they fight, they're going to fight. Show me the worst case. The numbers appeared on the display. Corin felt something he hadn't experienced in his entire military career. Genuine fear. The projections assumed Earth would fight the way humans had fought themselves. Every city a fortress, every building a stronghold. Occupation forces facing constant insurgency. Supply lines under perpetual attack. These numbers assume we can maintain force projection from orbit, Rovik noted. If they develop effective anti-orbital weapons during the occupation, the casualties increase significantly. They'll develop them, Corin said quietly. Did you see their technological progression? They went from basic flight to nuclear weapons in 40 years. They went from first satellite to moon landing in 12 years. If we give them time, they'll develop whatever they need. A communication alert interrupted them. The Command Council wanted to speak with Corin directly. That was unusual. Normally, they just sent orders. The fact that they wanted a conversation meant something had changed. Fleet Master. Corin's face appeared on the main display back on Earth 12 hours after the broadcast. Dr. Yunbi was monitoring all Valthak communications, and this one was different. It wasn't being sent to Earth's governments. It was being transmitted openly, on frequencies anyone could intercept. This is not a negotiation, Corin's translated voice said. We do not negotiate with subjects. However, the Command Council has authorized me to present you with new terms. Yunbi's heart raced. New terms meant the message had worked. They'd gotten the Valthak's attention. The Valthak Empire hereby designates Earth and its solar system as a protected exclusion zone. You will remain within your system. You will not expand beyond it. In exchange, we will not conquer your world. Any violation of this agreement will result in immediate and total retaliation. The transmission ended. For a moment, nobody in the command center moved. Then someone started crying, and then someone else was laughing, and then everyone was talking at once. They'd done it. Earth was safe, but Dr. Yunbi wasn't celebrating. She was reading the secondary transmissions, the ones the Valthak were sending to their other territories. They were warning their subjects about Earth, explaining that humans were too dangerous to conquer, too costly to occupy. They were making humanity an example. This changes everything, she said to Professor Dehan, who'd joined her in the command center. Changes how? The Valthak just told 73 conquered worlds that there's a species they're afraid of. They told them that resistance is possible, that the Empire can be deterred. Ambassador Yuna was discovering the same thing. As Earth's primary representative for extraterrestrial contact, she'd suddenly become very popular. Her communication channels were flooded with messages from species she'd never heard of. Some were offering alliance. Some were asking for help. Some were just asking questions about how humanity had done what they did. One message came from a species called the Dreskri, one of the Valthak's first conquests. We have been subjects of the Empire for 900 years. We thought resistance was impossible. You proved us wrong. Can you teach us? Another came from the Kelthani, conquered 60 years ago. The Valthak told us that species who resist face extinction. You resisted and survived. We need to know how. Yuna forwarded these messages to the Earth Council. Counselor Junho read them with a growing sense of dread. We didn't just deter the Valthak, he said. We inspired rebellion across their empire. Is that bad? Someone asked. I don't know. Maybe we just destabilized a third of the galaxy. Commander, Hyunwoo was back on the orbital platform when he received the message from Admiral Minho. You need to see this. It was an intelligence report compiled from various sources. The Valthak Empire was experiencing unrest. 3 of their conquered worlds had launched small rebellions within days of Earth's broadcast. They'd all been crushed, but the fact that they happened at all was significant. The Empire was showing cracks. More interestingly, other species were starting to treat Earth differently. Some were afraid, maintaining careful distance from human space, but others were reaching out, looking for alliances, partnerships, anything that would connect them to the species that had made the Valthak back down. We're not just survivors anymore, Minho said. We're a symbol. The question is, what kind of symbol do we want to be? The Valthak Command Council was asking themselves the same question about their empire. They sat in their chambers on the Empire homeworld, reviewing reports from across their territory. The footage from Earth had spread everywhere. Their subjects had seen it. Their military had seen it. Everyone now knew that the Empire could be deterred, that there were species they couldn't conquer. We should have destroyed them, one council member argued. Made an example, shown that resistance brings extinction. At what cost? Another countered. The projections showed occupation of Earth could have required 20% of our military for decades. 20% tied down on one planet, while 73 others watched us struggle. The rebellion risk would have been unacceptable, so we appear weak instead. We appear strategic. We chose not to waste resources on an unprofitable conquest. That's different from being unable to conquer. But the council members all knew the truth. They'd been afraid. Not of Earth's military, but of what humanity represented. A species that had spent millennia fighting itself and somehow gotten better at warfare with each generation. A species that had developed weapons of total annihilation and then demonstrated the discipline to not use them. A species that clearly understood the concept of mutually assured destruction and wasn't afraid of it. We need to ensure this doesn't happen again, the senior council member said. Identify any pre-contact civilizations that show similar patterns. Develop protocols for dealing with species that demonstrate human-like warfare characteristics. And most importantly, make sure our subjects understand that Earth is an anomaly, one unique case, not a template for successful resistance. 3 weeks after the broadcast, Earth was settling into its new reality. The Valthak had kept their word and withdrawn beyond the solar system's edge. Human ships could operate freely within the system, but going beyond was forbidden. It was a cage, but it was a cage they could live in. Dr. Yunbi was working with Ambassador Yuna now, trying to manage the flood of contact from other species. Some wanted to learn about human warfare. Some wanted to trade. Some just wanted to study the strange species that had frightened the Valthak. We need to be careful, Yunbi warned. We showed the galaxy what we're capable of. Now they're watching to see what we do with that reputation. Professor Daehan had a different concern. The Valthak backed down because conquering us was too expensive. But what if someone decides we're too dangerous to leave alone? What if instead of conquering us, they decide to destroy us from orbit before we can become a real threat? It was a valid fear. Earth had bought itself freedom through fear. Now they had to figure out how to live with the consequences. Commander Hyunwoo went home for the first time in a month. His daughter Nari ran to meet him at the door. She was 8 now, had a birthday during the crisis. He'd missed it. Dad, everyone at school says you saved the world. He picked her up, held her close. I just sent a message, sweetheart. That's all. But it hadn't been just a message. It had been a promise to the galaxy. A promise that humanity would rather burn than break. and now they had to figure out if that was the reputation they wanted to keep. 3 months after the broadcast, Earth was still adjusting to its new place in the galaxy. Commander Hyunwoo sat in a diplomatic briefing, listening to Ambassador Yuna explain the latest situation. They held these meetings weekly now, trying to keep track of how other species were reacting to humanity's existence. "We've received 17 formal alliance proposals," Yuna said, pulling up a holographic display. 12 requests for military consultation, 8 offers of technology exchange, and 3 warnings that if we leave our solar system, we'll be considered a threat and destroyed preemptively. "Only 3? Counselor Junho said dryly. "I expected more." "The Valtak's warning carries weight," Yuna explained. "Most species are taking a wait-and-see approach. They want to understand us better before committing to either friendship or hostility." Dr. Yunbi was tracking something more concerning. "I've been monitoring communications across the Valthak Empire. There have been 14 separate uprisings in the past 3 months. All of them referenced Earth in their declarations. They're using our broadcast as proof that the Empire can be resisted." "How many succeeded?" Professor Dayan asked. "None so far, but they're happening more frequently. The Valthak are spending significant resources putting down rebellions instead of expanding their territory. We've effectively frozen their conquest for the first time in their history." Hyunwoo thought about that. They'd saved Earth, but maybe they'd done more than that. Maybe they'd changed the entire balance of power in this region of space. He wasn't sure if that was good or bad yet. Captain Salmon had been analyzing the psychological impact of the broadcast. "Other species are divided in how they perceive us. Some see us as potential allies against the Valthak. Some see us as dangerous warmongers who might turn on anyone. And some, interestingly, see us as teachers." "Teachers of what?" Junyo asked. "Resistance, survival, how to fight when you're outnumbered and outgunned. Several species have asked if we'd be willing to share our military history and tactical doctrine." The room fell silent. Sharing human warfare knowledge with alien species, it could change everything. It could also make Earth responsible for conflicts they couldn't control. Admiral Minho spoke up from the corner where he'd been listening quietly. "We need to decide what kind of civilization we're going to be. Are we going to share what we know? Are we going to form alliances? Or are we going to stay isolated in our solar system and hope everyone leaves us alone?" "The latter isn't really an option," Yuna said. "We're not invisible anymore. The galaxy knows we exist, knows what we're capable of. Isolation is just delaying the decision." A message alert interrupted the meeting. It was marked urgent, coming through channels that Dr. Yunbi had established for important extraterrestrial communications. She opened it, read quickly, and her expression changed. "It's from the Valthak Empire. Direct communication from Fleetmaster Korin." Everyone tensed. Had the Valthak changed their minds? Were they coming back to finish what they started? Yunbi projected the message for everyone to read. It was short, almost cryptic. "To the humans of Earth. Your broadcast reached farther than you intended. Species across multiple sectors heard your message. Some see it as inspiration for resistance. Others see it as evidence that young species should be eliminated before they become threats. The Empire maintains its agreement to leave your system unmolested, but we cannot control how others react to your existence. You have made yourselves visible to the galaxy. Choose your next actions carefully." It was, in its own way, a warning, or maybe advice. Possibly the closest thing to respect the Valthak had ever shown a species they'd tried to conquer. "Well," Junho said after a long silence. "That's concerning." Yunwoo felt a chill. They'd been so focused on deterring the Valthak that they hadn't fully considered how other species might react. Some might see humanity as allies, but others might see them as a threat that needed to be eliminated while they were still confined to one solar system. Over the next week, the fears proved justified. 3 different species sent communications to Earth. 2 were threats. 1 was an offer to help eliminate humanity before they could spread beyond their system and destabilize more of the galaxy. "They're treating us like a virus that needs to be contained," Dr. Yunbi said, reading the messages with growing worry. Professor Dahan pulled up star charts. "The good news is that all 3 of these species are relatively far away. The bad news is that there are probably closer species thinking the same thing, who haven't bothered to announce their intentions. But there was also unexpected support. A coalition of 7 species that bordered Valthak territory sent a joint message offering protection and alliance. They saw humanity as a potential counterbalance to the Empire's power. If humans could deter the Valthak, Maybe together they could end the Empire's expansion permanently. Ambassador Yuna found herself negotiating agreements she'd never imagined. Earth went from being completely alone in the galaxy to being courted by multiple factions, all wanting to use humanity's reputation for their own purposes. We need to be strategic, she advised the Council. Every alliance we make creates enemies elsewhere. Every technology we share could be used against us eventually, but staying completely isolated makes us vulnerable. Captain Soman had been analyzing the political situation across known space. The galaxy is essentially splitting into three camps. Those who want to be our allies because they fear the Valthak more than they fear us. Those who want to eliminate us before we become a bigger threat. And those who are neutral but watching closely to see what we do next. What should we do next? Junyo asked. Nobody had a good answer. Commander Hyun-woo returned to the orbital platform, back to his regular duties defending Earth. But defense meant something different now. They weren't just watching for the Valthak. They were watching for anyone who might decide humanity needed to be eliminated. Lieutenant Ji-won was still working communications. We're receiving so many signals now, she told Hyun-woo. From species we never knew existed. Some friendly, some hostile, most just curious. We went from thinking we were alone to being in the middle of galactic politics in less than 4 months. Hyun-woo looked out at Earth, the same view he'd had when this all started. But everything was different now. They weren't the isolated species hoping to make contact anymore. They were the species that had frightened the galaxy's biggest empire. The species that had inspired rebellions across multiple sectors. The species that everyone was watching, waiting to see what they'd do next. His daughter Nari called him that evening. She was doing a school project about the broadcast, about what had happened. Dad, my teacher says we changed the galaxy. Is that true? I think so, sweetheart. Is that good? Hyun-woo thought carefully about his answer. I don't know yet. We showed everyone what we're capable of. Now we have to decide what we're going to do with that. It's like, imagine you got really good at fighting, and everyone at school found out. Some kids would want to be your friend. Some would be scared of you. Some might try to fight you just to prove they're not afraid. What would I do? You'd have to decide what kind of person you want to be. Strong but kind. Strong but scary. It's the same thing for Earth now, just bigger. After the call ended, Hyun-woo stayed at the viewing port. Dr. Yoonbi joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thinking about what comes next? She asked. Always. We saved Earth by showing the galaxy our history. Now we need to decide what our future looks like. Professor Daehan thinks we should form alliances, build a coalition against the Valthak. Captain Soman thinks we should stay isolated and strengthen our defenses. Ambassador Yuna thinks we should engage carefully, picking our partners strategically. What do you think? Yoonbi was quiet for a moment. I think we opened a door we can't close. The galaxy knows we exist. They know what we've done to ourselves and what we're capable of doing to others. We can't take that back, so we need to figure out how to live with it. Far across the galaxy, Fleet Master Korin was writing his report on the Earth incident. It would become required reading for all Valthak military officers. A study in how to identify species that were too costly to conquer. He wrote about humanity's history, their capacity for sustained warfare, their willingness to accept casualties that would break most civilizations. He wrote about their technological progression and their disturbing ability to restrain themselves from using their most powerful weapons. And he wrote about the cost of conquering such a species, not just in immediate casualties but in long-term occupation and the risk of inspiring rebellion elsewhere. His conclusion was simple. Some species are better left alone. Not because they cannot be defeated, but because victory would cost more than it gains. Earth represents the first species we have encountered that understands this calculation and was willing to make it their weapon. Other such species may exist. We must develop better methods of identifying them before committing to conquest. The report would change Valthak military doctrine. They would be more cautious now, more careful in choosing their targets. Earth had forced an empire to adapt. Back on Earth, the United Council held a final meeting to decide their path forward. After hours of debate, they reached a consensus. They would engage with the galaxy, but carefully. They would form alliances with species that shared their values. They would help those fighting against oppression, but only when asked and only when they could do so effectively. They would continue developing their defenses, but they would also work on diplomacy. Most importantly, They would try to be the civilization they'd only pretended to be, strong enough to defend themselves, wise enough to know when not to fight, and compassionate enough to help others without expecting them to become subjects or servants. Commander Hyun-woo read the Council's declaration and felt something he hadn't felt in months: hope. They'd survived by showing the galaxy their capacity for violence. Now they had a chance to show their capacity for something better. Earth had been next on the Valthak's list. One message made the galaxy shudder. Now humanity had to prove they were more than just the species that scared an empire. They had to become the species that deserved the future they'd fought so hard to protect. The galaxy was watching. Earth would show them something worth seeing.